An arrogant UFC champion calls out an old trainer at a youth center, mocking the gray-haired man teaching kids basic boxing moves. The cocky fighter films himself disrespecting the quiet veteran, calling him a washed-up gym rat and threatening to shut down the center unless someone shows him real fighting. The bully laughs as he pushes the older man around, not realizing he's just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because this isn't just any old trainer, this is Mike Tyson himself. The former heavyweight destroyer has been living peacefully, mentoring at-risk kids and staying out of the spotlight. But now the young champion has threatened the children Mike protects, crossing a line that awakens something terrifying. The punk's camera keeps rolling as he doubles down on his challenge, demanding the boxing legend prove himself in the octagon. While the fighter's crew films what they think will be another humiliation, they're actually capturing the moment. A predator realizes he's cornered the most dangerous man alive. What happens when you threaten Mike Tyson's kids? Will the champion survive learning why some legends earned their fear? What happened next would terrorize the young fighter for the rest of his pathetic career. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crowd at Madison Square Garden roared as Brad, the bulldozer, Mitchell stepped into the octagon. His blonde hair caught the arena lights as he flexed for the cameras, showing off the tattoos that covered his muscled frame. At 28, he moved like a predator who had never tasted defeat. Across the cage, Tony Velasquez bounced on his toes, trying to look confident. The veteran fighter had earned this shot through years of grinding wins, but everyone knew he was here to make Brad look good. "Let's see what you got, old man." Brad sneered as the referee gave final instructions. The fight began exactly as Brad planned. He circled Velasquez like a shark, landing quick jabs and kicks while staying just out of range. For 2 rounds, he toyed with his opponent, showing off for the crowd instead of finishing the fight. His corner yelled at him to stop playing around, but Brad was having too much fun. "This is too easy," he called to his camera crew between rounds. In the 3rd round, Brad decided to end the show. He trapped Velasquez against the cage and unleashed a brutal combination. Left hook to the liver, right uppercut to the jaw, another left hook that dropped Velasquez like a sack of cement. The challenger's head bounced off the canvas with a sickening thud. The referee didn't even bother counting. Velasquez was completely unconscious, his arms twisted at odd angles. Medical staff rushed into the octagon as Brad celebrated over the fallen fighter. The crowd's cheers mixed with worried murmurs as doctors worked on Velasquez. Brad didn't spare his opponent a second glance. He grabbed the microphone from the ring announcer and stood over the medical team, sweat dripping from his perfect physique. The arena fell quiet as everyone realized the young champion had something to say. "Listen up," Brad's voice echoed through the arena. His manager Danny Kowalski tried to wave him off, but Brad was beyond caring about anyone else's opinion. This was his moment, and he planned to make it count. "I am the greatest fighter who ever lived." Brad's voice boomed through Madison Square Garden. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Young fans cheered while older spectators frowned at his arrogance. "I just destroyed another challenger without breaking a sweat. There's nobody in any sport, any era, who could hang with what I bring to this octagon. I am the peak of human evolution in combat." ESPN reporter Jessica Martinez pushed through the crowd of cameras. She'd covered boxing for 20 years and had heard plenty of big talk, but Brad's attitude rubbed her wrong. "Brad, what about legendary boxers like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, or Mike Tyson? Do you really think you could? Are you serious right now?" Brad laughed so hard he nearly dropped the microphone. "Those dinosaurs fought in a gentleman's sport with padded gloves and hugging rules. Real fighting is what I do. Mixed martial arts. The complete game." His manager Danny tried to step in, sensing trouble, but Brad shoved him away. Any of those old guys would be unconscious in 30 seconds against modern technique. "Ali, please. Frazier? Don't make me laugh. And Tyson?" Brad paused for dramatic effect. That crazy old man would be eating canvas before he knew what hit him. The arena grew uncomfortably quiet. Several older reporters exchanged glances, remembering when those names meant something beyond internet memes and highlight reels. "You're talking about legends," Martinez pressed. "Men who I'm talking about has-beens," Brad cut her off. "Ancient history. I'm the apex predator." Every so-called legend before me was just practice for what fighting could become. This is the modern era, and I'm the modern gladiator. Brad's corner tried to pull him away from the microphones, but he wasn't finished. I'm issuing an open challenge to any old-timer who thinks they still got it. Come find me. I'll be happy to show the world that your time is over and mine has just begun. The press conference ended in stunned silence. Veteran reporters who had covered boxing's golden age sat speechless as Brad strutted away, his entourage cheering like he'd just conquered Rome itself. Nobody spoke for a full minute after he left. 24 hours later, Brad's apartment overlooked Central Park from the 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows gave him a view of the city he planned to conquer completely. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the press conference. "Check these numbers," Ashley Park said, sliding her tablet across his marble kitchen counter. His social media manager was barely older than Brad, but understood viral content better than anyone. 15 million views across all platforms. The engagement is insane. Brad scrolled through the comments, feeding off the attention like a drug. Young fans called him the greatest fighter alive. Older viewers were less kind, but their anger only made him smile wider. "Look at these old fools getting triggered," he laughed, reading angry responses from former boxers. "They know I'm right, and it's killing them." "The negative comments are actually driving more engagement," Ashley explained. "Controversy sells, but maybe we should balance it out a little. Some positive PR to keep the brands happy." Brad posted another video, this one directly mocking grandpa fighters and their pillow hands. He shadowboxed while describing how he'd destroy each boxing legend in graphic detail. Every gesture was calculated for maximum viral impact. 30 million views by tomorrow, he predicted. "Definitely. But listen, I set up something for tomorrow morning. Charity appearance at a youth center in Brooklyn. Good visuals, great PR to show you care about kids. Perfect counter-narrative to the negative press. Do I have to actually do anything? Just show up, take some pictures, maybe demonstrate some moves for the cameras. Easy content, and it makes you look like more than just a fighter." The place is called Brownsville Youth Center. Small operation, but the director Dorothy Washington has a solid reputation. Brad wasn't really listening. He was already planning his next video, maybe something about challenging every boxing Hall of Famer to step up or shut up. The attention was intoxicating, and he wanted more. "Whatever. Set it up. But make sure the cameras get good angles. I want this to look professional." Ashley nodded, already making notes on her phone. Neither of them bothered researching who actually ran the boxing program at the center. Brad's black Escalade pulled up to the modest Brownsville Youth Center the next morning. The building looked tired compared to his usual venues, but Ashley assured him the contrast would make great content. Poor kids getting inspired by a champion. The story practically wrote itself. "Remember, we're going for humble and inspirational." Ashley coached as they walked toward the entrance, her cameraman following close behind. Inside, Brad found a dozen kids gathered around a makeshift boxing ring. Their trainer was a stocky older man with graying hair and a calm presence that immediately annoyed Brad. The guy wore a simple gray t-shirt and track pants, nothing fancy, and moved with the careful precision of someone who'd seen better days. The man was teaching proper stance to a young girl, maybe 10 years old, adjusting her feet with patient hands while explaining balance and breathing. Reading glasses hung from a cord around his neck, making him look more like a librarian than a fighter. "This is your big boxing program," Brad whispered to Ashley, loud enough for the kids to hear. "My warm-up routine is harder than this." The trainer looked up briefly but didn't acknowledge the disruption. He continued working with the children, showing them how to hold their hands, how to move their feet, how to breathe properly. Basic stuff that Brad had mastered before his 10th birthday. "Watch this," Brad told his cameraman, approaching the heavy bag hanging in the corner. "Let me show these kids what real boxing looks like." He unleashed a flashy combination on the bag, spinning kicks, flashy punches, moves designed to impress, rather than devastate. The bag swayed dramatically under his assault while the kids stopped their lesson to watch. "That's how you hit something," Brad announced, barely breathing hard. "Power and speed, not this vintage stuff your teacher's showing you." The older man finished giving water to one of the younger boys, then walked over to where Brad was still, posing next to the heavy bag. "Excuse me," the trainer said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of authority that caught Brad off guard. Could you please let the children finish their lesson first? Brad's face flushed red at being corrected by some nobody trainer. The cameras were rolling. His social media empire was watching, and this old man was treating him like a disruptive child. Are you kidding me right now? Brad's voice echoed through the small gym. I'm trying to help these kids learn real fighting techniques, not this antique boxing garbage you're teaching them. The children shifted uncomfortably as Brad's tone grew hostile. Several younger kids moved closer to their trainer, sensing the change in atmosphere. These kids need to see modern combat skills, Brad continued, gesturing wildly. Not some washed-up gym rat showing them moves from the stone. Age. When's the last time you actually want to fight, old man? Mike's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained calm. This is their safe space. Please respect that. Safe space. Brad laughed harshly. The world isn't safe. These kids need to learn reality, not fairy tales about honor and respect. They need to see what a real champion looks like. He moved closer to Mike, using his height advantage to intimidate. I win fights for a living. I destroy people in front of millions of viewers. What do? Teach kids to play patty cake with gloves on. 12-year-old Marcus Johnson started to speak up, but Mike placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, keeping him back. The world has plenty of anger already, Mike said quietly. These children don't need more. Oh, that's rich coming from you. Brad turned to address his camera directly. Check this out, everybody. This is what happens to fighters. When they get old and soft, they end up in places like this, pretending their glory days mattered. The other children looked scared now, not understanding why this stranger was being so mean to their teacher. A few began backing toward the exit. You want to lecture me about respect? Brad's voice rose another octave. I earn millions of dollars. Every time I step into the octagon, I'm the face of modern combat sports. And you're what? A volunteer at a community center. Mike's hands remained steady at his sides, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried decades of barely contained power. These kids don't need to see grown men acting like children. Brad exploded. Don't lecture. Me, old man. I'd put you to sleep in 10 seconds flat. The gym fell dead silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Brad's words hung in the air like a physical threat, and even his cameraman seemed unsure whether to keep filming. Dorothy Washington pushed through the front door at that exact moment, drawn by the raised voices. The center's director took one. Look at the scene. A grown man towering over her boxing instructor while children cowered nearby and stepped between them immediately. What's going on here? Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd broken up countless fights over the years. Just showing these kids what real fighting looks like, Brad sneered, but Dot's presence seemed to deflate some of his bravado. Across the room, Danny Kowalski had been hanging back near the entrance, checking his phone and trying to stay out of the promotional footage. But now he looked up at the confrontation, really seeing Mike's face for the first time. The color drained from Danny's cheeks like someone had opened a valve. His hands began shaking as recognition hit him like a physical blow. He tried frantically to signal Brad, waving his arms and making cutting motions across his throat, but his fighter was too caught up in the performance to notice. This old trainer here thinks he can teach boxing, Brad continued, oblivious to his manager's growing panic. I'm just explaining how the modern world works to these kids. Young Marcus Johnson had heard enough. The boy stepped forward despite Mike's protective hand on his shoulder. That's Mr. Tyson, Marcus said with the simple clarity of childhood. He's the baddest man on the planet. Brad's mocking laugh died in his throat. His entire body went rigid as the words registered. Around the room, the other children nodded solemnly, wondering why the stranger looked so confused. He knocked out everybody, 8-year-old Lisa added helpfully. Mr. Tyson showed us videos. Brad's eyes darted to his manager, finally noticing Danny's horrified expression and frantic gestures. The realization hit him like a freight train, but instead of fear or embarrassment, something else entirely spread across his face, a slow, predatory smile. Well. Brad's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper as he studied Mike with new eyes. Iron Mike Tyson, the legend himself. The cameraman instinctively zoomed in, sensing that something significant was happening. This just got a whole lot more interesting, Brad murmured. Already calculating the viral potential of this moment, Brad's entire demeanor shifted as opportunity crystallized in his mind. The greatest promotional gift in combat sports history had just fallen into his lap, and he was going to squeeze every drop of publicity from it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to his camera with theatrical flair, "we have ourselves a genuine celebrity here. The one and only Mike Tyson, former heavyweight champion of the world." Mike tried to deflect attention back to the children. "These kids are just here to learn basic boxing skills. There's nothing." Brad cut him off with genuine glee. "This is perfect. Mike Tyson, I know exactly who you are now, and I'm officially calling you out." The children watched in growing alarm as Brad began pacing like a caged animal, his excitement building with each word. "You've been filling these kids' heads with stories about the old days, haven't you? Well, I'm about to show them what a real champion looks like in the modern era. I challenge you, Mike Tyson, to step into the octagon with me." "That's not necessary," Mike said calmly. "These children don't need to see." "Oh, but they do." Brad's voice rose triumphantly. "They need to understand that their so-called hero is just another washed-up has-been living in the past. I'll knock you out, Grandpa, and prove to these kids that this generation doesn't need yesterday's heroes." Dot stepped forward protectively. "You need to leave. Now." "Not until Iron Mike here accepts my challenge," Brad replied, his cameraman capturing every word. "Because here's the thing, I've got connections throughout the city. Health inspectors, safety officials, people who could shut down this little operation with a phone call." The threat landed like a physical blow. Several children gasped, and Marcus moved closer to Mike's side. "You wouldn't," Dot said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. "Try me. This place looks like a safety nightmare to me. All those violations just waiting to be discovered. Unless, of course, someone proves that boxing isn't just for has-beens who can't let go of past glory." Mike watched the fear creep into the children's eyes and felt something old and dangerous stirring in his chest. These kids had found hope in this place, purpose in learning discipline and respect. The idea of some pampered punk destroying their sanctuary was unbearable. "If it means protecting this place and these kids," Mike said quietly, each word carefully measured, "we'll discuss terms." Brad pumped his fist in victory while his camera captured the moment. "That's what I wanted to hear. The world's going to love this." Danny finally found his voice, rushing forward with panic written across his face. "Brad, wait. We need to think about this. The thinking's done," Brad declared. "Iron Mike Tyson just accepted my challenge, and it's all on video." 2 days later, Mike sat across from Vincent Torino in a midtown office that reeked of expensive cologne and cheaper ethics. He'd brought Sammy Rodriguez for moral support, thinking they were arranging a simple charity exhibition with oversized gloves and safety protocols. "Gentlemen, welcome," Vinny said, his gold jewelry catching the light as he gestured to leather chairs. "Coffee? Water? Something stronger?" Mike declined politely while studying the promoter. Everything about Vinny screamed danger from his predatory smile to the way his eyes never quite met yours directly. "Let's keep this simple," Mike said. "Charity exhibition, 3 rounds. Proceeds go to the youth center. Standard safety measures." "Oh, we're thinking much bigger than that," Vinny replied, sliding a thick contract across his mahogany desk. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Mike Tyson versus the current UFC champion. The whole world wants to see this fight." Sammy picked up the contract and his face went pale. "This isn't an exhibition. These are professional bout terms. Full UFC rules in a regulation octagon. That's not what we discussed," Mike said, standing to leave. "Sit down." Vinny's voice hardened. "You might want to hear what I have to say about your precious youth center first." He produced a manila folder thick with official-looking documents. "Funny thing about old buildings. So many potential safety violations just waiting to be discovered. Electrical issues, structural problems, fire code violations. The city could shut that place down tomorrow if the right person made the right phone call." Mike's hands clenched into fists. "You son of a language, Vinny chuckled. "I'm not the bad guy here. I'm offering you a solution. This fight generates enough revenue to fund all the repairs your little center needs. Legal, legitimate, everybody wins." "Except Mike could get seriously hurt," Sammy protested. "That's the beauty of it." Brad's voice came from behind them as he entered with Danny trailing nervously behind. "The old man gets to go out on his back. Like he should have years ago." Mike realized the trap was perfectly constructed. refuse to fight, and the children lose their safe haven. Accept and face a chemically enhanced opponent 28 years younger in his prime. 3 weeks, Vinny announced. That's how long you have to prepare. Take it or leave it, but decide now. I've got paperwork to file with the city tomorrow morning. Mike looked at Sammy's worried face, then at the contracts that would determine the fate of 12 kids who counted on him for guidance and hope. He signed his name with steady hands. As they left the building, Sammy overheard Vinny on a phone call through the partially open office door. Don't worry about the spread, the promoter was saying. I've got millions riding on the old man going down hard. This is going to be the easiest money we ever made. The next morning, Mike pushed through the door of Rodriguez's gym in the Bronx. The place felt like stepping back in time. Cracked mirrors, worn heavy bags, and the smell of honest sweat that no amount of modern equipment could replicate. You sure about this, Iron Mike? Sammy asked, wrapping Mike's hands with practiced efficiency. Your body's been through enough wars. Mike flexed his fingers, testing the wrap tension. Those kids are counting on me, Sammy. I can't let them down. The first training session was a brutal reality check. Mike's joints ached with each movement, his reflexes a half step slower than muscle memory expected. 3 minutes on the heavy bag left him breathing harder than it should have. His famous peekaboo style felt rusty, timing off by fractions that could mean the difference between victory and catastrophe. We'll adapt, Sammy said, studying Mike's movements. Your power's still there. We just need to be smarter about when you use it. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Las Vegas, Brad's training videos dominated social media. His state-of-the-art facility looked like something from a science fiction movie. Computerized equipment, recovery chambers, and a full medical staff monitoring every aspect of his preparation. Each workout was live-streamed to millions of viewers. Looking good, champ, Ashley called from behind her camera setup. The engagement numbers are insane. Everybody wants to see you destroy the old man. Brad demolished a heavy bag with combinations. That would have hospitalized most men. His speed was inhuman, his conditioning perfect. Recovery time between brutal sessions seemed impossibly short. Tell them I'm not just fighting Mike Tyson, Brad panted between rounds. I'm fighting the entire myth of boxing's so-called golden age. When I knock him out, it proves once and for all that evolution doesn't move backward. Back in the Bronx, Mike finished his session and headed straight to the youth center. Evening classes were smaller, just 8 kids whose parents worked. Late shifts, but their enthusiasm never dimmed. Mr. Tyson, Marcus asked as they worked on basic combinations, are you scared about fighting that guy? Mike considered the question seriously while adjusting the boy's stance. Around them, the other children stopped their exercises to listen. Fear makes you sharp, son, Mike said finally. It's not about not being scared. It's about fighting anyway, especially when something important is at stake. Marcus nodded solemnly, filing the wisdom away with all the other lessons his teacher had shared. None of them noticed the phone camera recording through the window. At BY morning, Mike's honest moment with Marcus had been captured, edited, and uploaded by someone with a steady hand and social media savvy. The video showed Iron Mike Tyson admitting fear, and the internet exploded with commentary. Even Iron Mike knows he's done, read one popular tweet with 50,000 likes. Sports networks ran countdown clocks to the fight, while expert panels dissected every frame of the leaked footage. Former champions called Mike's phone to offer support, but their voices carried worry that cut deeper than any insult. Don't do this, Mike, pleaded Tommy Morrison during one call. You got nothing left to prove and everything to lose. But it was Brad's response that hurt most. He appeared on every major show, describing in graphic detail how he planned to humiliate Mike in front of the children who looked up to him. The old man's scared, and he should be, Brad told ESPN's Morning Crew. When I'm done with him, those kids will understand that their so-called hero was just living in the past. It's going to be sad to watch, honestly. The host tried to inject some respect into the conversation. But surely you acknowledge Mike Tyson's legendary status. Legendary. What? Getting knocked out by guys who wouldn't make my undercard? Look, I respect what he did back in the Stone Age, but this is 2024. I'm faster, stronger, better conditioned, and 30 years younger. It's going to be a massacre. Mike watched the interview from the youth center, where fewer kids showed up. each day as parents worried about the attention surrounding their program. The remaining children gathered around him, their faith unshaken despite the media storm. "He talks too much," 8-year-old Lisa observed. "Fighters who talk the most usually got the most to prove," Mike replied. But his eyes stayed fixed on the television screen. The worst part wasn't Brad's predictions of victory. Mike had heard that from dozens of opponents over the years. It was the casual cruelty, the way Brad described Mike's coming humiliation, like he was discussing the weather. "We'll see," Mike murmured to himself as Brad continued his verbal assault on screen. The young champion wrapped up his appearance with a promise that made Mike's blood run cold. "I'm not just going to beat Mike Tyson. I'm going to break him. Physically, mentally, spiritually. When I'm done, he'll wish he'd stayed retired. And maybe then these kids will find some real heroes to look up to." The interview ended with Brad's predatory smile filling the screen. In the quiet youth center, surrounded by children who still believed in him, Mike felt the first stirring of the legendary rage that had made him the most feared man in boxing. Mike arrived at the youth center the next morning to find fresh graffiti covering the brick walls. "Old man's gonna die," was spray painted in red letters 6 feet high. Below it, someone had added "Tyson equals has been" in dripping black paint. "I'll clean this up," Dot said, appearing beside him with a bucket and scrub brush. Her face was tight. With anger. "No," Mike said quietly. "Leave it. I want everyone to see what we're dealing with." The harassment had started small: prank phone calls, fake online reviews claiming the center was unsafe. But over the following days, it escalated into something more sinister. City health inspectors showed up unannounced, combing through every room looking for violations that didn't exist. Fire marshals arrived with clipboards, measuring exits and questioning occupancy limits. "This is coordinated," Duck told Mike after the third surprise inspection in 2 days. "Someone's pulling strings." The psychological warfare reached new lows when bomb threats started coming in. Police had to sweep the building twice, traumatizing the children and forcing them to consider closing temporarily. "Mr. Tyson," Marcus asked after the second evacuation, "why are they being so mean to us?" Mike knelt down to the boy's eye level. "Some people think fear makes them strong. But real strength comes from protecting others, not hurting them." The attacks on social media were relentless. Brad's team leaked Mike's address, his phone number, even photos of his apartment building. Fans showed up at all hours, some supportive but others hostile. Sleep became impossible. "You should stay somewhere else," Sammy suggested after Mike arrived at the gym exhausted for the third straight day. "I'm not running from some punk kid," Mike replied, but the strain was showing. The final straw came on a Tuesday evening. Mike had walked Marcus home after late training, making sure the boy reached his grandmother's apartment safely. As he headed back to his own building, he spotted 3 men in hoodies cornering Marcus near the corner store. Mike sprinted the full block, his heart pounding with more than exertion. By the time he reached them, the men were backing away from a terrified Marcus, their message delivered. "Tell your old trainer to quit before he gets hurt," one of them called over his shoulder as they melted into the night. Marcus ran straight to Mike, tears streaming down his face. "They said they'd hurt Grandma if you don't stop fighting." Mike knelt and pulled the boy close, feeling his small body shake with fear. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside the former champion. The protective instincts that had driven him since childhood roared back to life with volcanic intensity. "Nobody's going to hurt you or your grandmother," Mike promised, his voice carrying deadly certainty. "I give you my word." Mike walked Marcus home again the next morning, then stood guard outside the boy's apartment building until well after sunrise. His mind raced with protective fury and strategic planning, the combination that had once made him unstoppable. That evening, he found the 3 men at Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar 6 blocks from the youth center. They were celebrating their successful intimidation with cheap beer and loud laughter, never imagining their target would come looking for them. Mike entered alone and walked directly to their table. The bar's conversation died as patrons recognized the legendary boxer's distinctive silhouette and purposeful stride. "Gentlemen," Mike said quietly, placing both hands flat on their sticky table. His voice carried no anger, no emotion at all, just the calm certainty of approaching storm. The 3 men sobered instantly. The largest one, who'd done most of the talking with Marcus, tried to bluster through his sudden fear. "Hey, look who it is." The washed up, "You threatened a child," Mike interrupted, his words cutting through the man's bravado like a blade. That was a mistake. Without raising his voice or making a single threatening gesture, Mike leaned forward slightly. The movement was minimal, but something in his eyes made all three men lean back in their chairs. "You're going to leave this neighborhood tonight and never come back. You're going to forget that boy exists. And if I even hear rumors that someone matching your descriptions was seen within 10 blocks of that child, I'll come looking for you again." The silence stretched for 10 seconds that felt like an hour. Then the leader nodded rapidly. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Yeah, sure, no problem. We were just leaving," Mike finished. Now, the three men practically ran from the bar, leaving their beers unfinished and their tough guy reputations in ruins. Mike walked out without another word, knowing he'd never see them in his neighborhood again. When he returned to the youth center, Doe was waiting with a manila envelope and a grim expression. "You need to see this," she said, sliding photos across her desk. The images were from Mike's darkest period: arrest photos, tabloid shots of him at his worst, moments he'd hoped the world had forgotten. Someone had dug up every embarrassing detail from his troubled past. "Brad's people are spreading these online," Dot explained. "They're painting you as an unstable has-been who shouldn't be around children. Some parents are already talking about pulling their kids from the program." Mike studied the photos of a younger, angrier version of himself. The man in these pictures had been lost, destructive, everything he'd worked years to leave behind. "Maybe they're right," he said quietly. "Maybe I am too damaged to be anyone's hero." Dot's hand covered his across the desk. "That man in those pictures isn't who you are now. These children know the real Mike Tyson, and they're not going anywhere." But some parents didn't see it that way. Over the next few days, Mike watched as his past sins drove away the very people he was fighting to protect. Mrs. Chin pulled her twin boys from the program after seeing the tabloid photos online. The Rodriguez family stopped coming after reading social media posts about Mike's violent history. "This is what Brad wanted," Mike told Sammy as they watched only 6 kids show up for evening training. "He's poisoning everything I've built here." The leaked stories painted Mike as a dangerous relic who'd never truly changed. Comment sections filled with people questioning why someone with his troubled past was allowed around children. Every mistake from his darkest period was magnified and twisted. "Let them talk," Sammy said, adjusting the heavy bag chains. "The people who matter know who you really are." Mike channeled his pain into the training session that followed. For 45 minutes, he worked the heavy bag with an intensity that reminded everyone in the gym why he'd once been the most feared man in boxing. Each combination carried decades of frustration, each hook powered by protective rage. The bag shuddered under impacts that sounded like gunshots. Sweat flew with every movement as Mike's body remembered what it meant to be a destroyer of men. His breathing became rhythmic, controlled, each breath timed with devastating precision. "That's it," Sammy whispered, watching his fighter tap into something primal. "There he is." Young Marcus had stayed late, watching from a corner with wide eyes as his teacher transformed before him. This wasn't the patient, gentle man who helped him with his stance. This was Iron Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet. The final combination was a thing of beauty and terror, a left hook to the body that would have dropped a heavy weight, followed by an uppercut that carried 40 years of accumulated power. The heavy bag exploded upward with such force that both chains snapped simultaneously. The 150-pound bag crashed to the concrete floor with a thunderous boom that echoed through the stunned gym. In the silence that followed, everyone stared at the broken chains hanging from the ceiling like metallic witnesses to destruction. "Jesus," breathed one of the older fighters who'd been training nearby. Mike stood over the fallen bag, his chest rising and falling in controlled rhythms, his eyes still carrying that dangerous light. Sweat dripped from his face onto the leather surface that had absorbed punishment from hundreds of fighters but had never experienced anything like this. Sammy walked over quietly and placed a hand on Mike's shoulder. "Now we're getting somewhere." Footage of Mike's devastating heavy bag work leaked online within hours, uploaded by someone who'd been filming through the gym's window. The video showed Mike's explosive power in HD clarity, the bag's violent movement, the thunderous impacts, the chains snapping under forces that seemed to defy physics. Sports analysts who'd written Mike off as a nostalgic curiosity suddenly found themselves breaking down the leaked training footage frame by frame. The power was undeniable, and more importantly, the technique was flawless. This wasn't some old man flailing wildly. This was controlled violence from someone who understood destruction at a molecular level. Look at the hip rotation, ESPN's boxing expert explained to his co-host. That's textbook Tyson. The power generation is still there. Age hasn't touched the fundamentals. Public opinion began shifting as the video racked up millions of views. Comment sections that had mocked Mike days earlier now buzzed with grudging respect and excitement. Even younger viewers who'd never seen Iron Mike in his prime started to understand what the fuss was about. In Las Vegas, Brad watched the leaked footage on his phone while cooling down from his latest training session. For the first time since issuing his challenge, doubt crept into his expression. "It's just one lucky combination," he told Ashley, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Old man probably threw out his back doing it. Ashley noticed her client's changed demeanor, but kept filming. Doubt made for good content, and Brad's slight vulnerability was already generating engagement. Brad's own training became more intense, bordering on reckless as he tried to match the devastating power he'd seen in Mike's video. His sessions stretched longer, his recovery periods shortened, his already impressive physique becoming more defined by the day. "Kid's pushing too hard," observed one of Brad's regular sparring partners. "Something's got him spooked." Back in New York, Sammy studied hours of Brad's recent training footage, looking for weaknesses to exploit. But something else caught his attention, something that bothered him more with each video he watched. "Mike, come look at this," Sammy called from his laptop in the gym's cramped office. They watched Brad's latest session together, focusing on the technical aspects of his movement and combinations. But Sammy's concern wasn't about technique. "You see how fast he recovers between rounds?" Sammy pointed out. "Kid goes full intensity for 5 minutes. Then he's breathing normal 30 seconds later. In 40 years of training fighters, I've never seen natural recovery like that." Mike studied Brad's physique in the high-definition footage. The muscle definition was almost cartoonish, too perfect, too symmetrical, lacking the natural imperfections that came with honest training. "His muscle mass has increased significantly since his last fight," Sammy continued. "That kind of lean bulk doesn't happen naturally in fight camp. Usually fighters lose weight getting ready." "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Mike asked. "In my 4 decades in this game, I've seen this before," Sammy said grimly. "That boy's getting chemical help." Acting on Sammy's suspicions, Mike reached out to connections throughout boxing's underground network, trainers, cut men, and sparring partners who'd seen every trick in the book. Within 2 days, they had their first lead, Tommy Chun, a former welterweight who worked security at high-end medical facilities, agreed to meet Mike at a diner in Queens. Tommy looked nervous as he slid photographs across the Formica table. "These were taken 3 weeks ago at a private clinic in Manhattan," Tommy whispered. "Guy who took them works maintenance there. Says they see a lot of athletes getting treatments." The photos showed Brad entering and leaving an unmarked building with Danny Kowalski and another man Mike didn't recognize. More importantly, they showed Brad's arm with what appeared to be in 4-line attached. "Same building Vinny Torino owns through a shell company," Tommy added. "Place officially treats executive wellness, but word is they'll enhance anybody who can pay." Mike's investigation team expanded to include 2 former sparring partners who'd become private investigators after retirement. Within a week, they had video evidence of Brad receiving regular injections at Vinny's facility, along with documentation of sophisticated performance-enhancing drug protocols. The evidence was damning: testosterone, human growth hormone, EPO for endurance, and several experimental compounds that weren't even legally available. Brad had been chemically enhanced throughout his entire UFC career. "This changes everything," Sammy said as they reviewed the evidence. "Kid's not just naturally gifted. He's been juicing since day one." Mike felt a mixture of relief and disgust. Relief because it explained Brad's inhuman conditioning and recovery. Disgust because it meant every victory, every championship, every moment of supposed greatness had been built on lies. "We take this to the Athletic Commission," Mike decided. "Walter Davidson's been chairman for 15 years. He's old school. He'll do the right thing." They arranged a meeting with Chairman Davidson at his Manhattan office. Mike presented the evidence methodically, photographs, video footage, medical records that showed Brad's drug protocol in explicit detail. Davidson studied the materials with the gravity they deserved. This is serious, Mike. If this is accurate, we're talking about systematic fraud, career-long doping violations, and endangering opponents who thought they were fighting a clean athlete. So the fight's off. Mike asked hopefully. I'll have to convene an emergency hearing, but based on this evidence, I don't see how we can allow Mr. Mitchell to compete. We'll suspend him pending a full investigation. Mike left the commission office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The youth center would be saved without him having to risk his health against a chemically enhanced opponent 30 years younger. That evening, he gathered the remaining kids at the center to share the good news. The fight's been called off, he announced to cheers from Marcus and the others. The commission found evidence that Brad was cheating, so he's been suspended. Our center is safe. Organized an impromptu celebration with pizza and soda, their first genuinely happy gathering since this nightmare began. The celebration was in full swing when Vincent Torino pushed through the front door, followed by Brad and a team of lawyers in expensive suits. The laughter died instantly as the children instinctively moved closer to Mike and Dot. Sorry to interrupt the party, Vinny announced with a predatory smile. But we need to clear up a little misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Mike said, standing protectively in front of the kids. Brad's been suspended for drug violations. The commission has reviewed the evidence and found it insufficient, Vinny interrupted, producing official documents. Mr. Mitchell's suspension has been overturned due to lack of conclusive proof. Mike's blood turned to ice as he read the letterhead. New York State Athletic Commission, signed by Chairman Walter Davidson himself. That's impossible, Mike said. I showed them video evidence, medical records, circumstantial at best. Brad sneered, his confidence fully restored. Funny how photos can be doctored these days. Amazing what technology can do. One of Vinny's lawyers stepped forward with more paperwork. Furthermore, we've discovered serious safety violations at this facility that require immediate attention. The city has issued a condemnation order effective tomorrow morning. Dot snatched the papers, her face growing pale as she read. This is impossible. We passed every inspection just last month. Things change, Vinny shrugged. Old buildings develop problems. Gas leaks, structural instability, fire hazards. The city can't risk children's safety in a facility that doesn't meet current codes. Unless, of course, Brad added with theatrical timing, the fight proceeds as scheduled. The revenue from our bout would cover all necessary repairs and improvements. Amazing how money solves problems. Mike realized the full scope of the trap. You own Davidson. I own lots of people, Vinny replied casually. Gambling debts are terrible things. They make honest men do dishonest things. He produced one final document, a foreclosure notice for the youth center property. Here's the beautiful part, Vinny continued. The fight has been moved up to this Friday night, 48 hours from now. Gives us great urgency for promotional purposes and prevents any more investigations. The children looked terrified as they began to understand that their safe haven was disappearing no matter what happened. Marcus stepped closer to Mike, his young face showing more courage than fear. So what's it gonna be, Iron Mike? Brad taunted. You gonna save these kids, or are you gonna let them down like you let down everyone else in your pathetic life? Mike looked at the foreclosure papers, at the frightened children, at Dot's desperate face. Every option led to the same conclusion, stepping into an octagon in 48 hours against a chemically enhanced fighter with corrupt officials ensuring no fair treatment. I'll see you Friday night, Mike said quietly. Brad's laugh echoed through the youth center as they left. See you Friday, Grandpa. Hope you're ready to be exposed as a fraud in front of your little friends. Mike sat alone in the empty youth center at midnight, surrounded by photos of former champions and his young students. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the makeshift boxing ring where children had learned to believe in themselves. 48 hours to prepare for the most important fight of his life, and his body felt every one of his 59 years. The training session that afternoon had been brutal, joints screaming with each movement, reflexes a half step behind where they needed to be, 3 minutes on the heavy bag, leaving him winded like never before. Mike Dot's voice came from the doorway. She'd found him here, slumped in a metal folding chair, staring at a picture of young Marcus throwing his first real combination. Maybe they're right, Mike said without looking up. Maybe I am just a broken-down old man who can't let go. Dot pulled up a chair beside him. You want to know what I think? I think you're scared. And you should be. That boy is 28, enhanced with drugs, and has been training specifically to hurt you. Thanks for the pep talk, Mike said with bitter humor. I'm not finished, Dot continued. You're also Mike Tyson. You've been in impossible situations before. The difference is, this time you're not fighting for yourself. You're fighting for something bigger. Mike looked around the small gym that had become more important to him than any championship belt. What if I let them down? What if I get in that octagon and I'm just done? Then you'll have tried, Dot said simply. And sometimes that's enough. But as she left him alone with his doubts, Mike wasn't sure trying would be enough. Not against a chemically enhanced opponent 30 years younger. Not with corrupt officials ensuring no fair treatment. Not when one mistake could mean the end of everything these kids had built here. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through social media, watching Brad's latest training videos. The young champion moved with inhuman speed and power, his conditioning perfect, his confidence absolute. Every comment predicted Mike's destruction in graphic detail. You ready to die, old man? Read one particularly cruel post with thousands of likes. Mike closed the phone and sat in the darkness, feeling the weight of mortality for the first time in decades. His legendary career, his reputation, his physical gifts, all of it meant nothing if he couldn't protect 12 children who believed heroes were real. The clock on the wall ticked toward tomorrow, each second bringing him closer to a reckoning. He wasn't sure he could survive. Mike's phone rang at dawn. Sammy's voice was steady and determined. I'm on my way over, the old trainer announced. We got work to do. Sammy, listen, Mike started. No, you listen. I've been thinking all night. And here's what I know. You're Mike Tyson. You've been counted out before, and you've made believers out of doubters every single time. 48 hours is enough if we're smart about it. When Mike arrived at Rodriguez's gym an hour later, Sammy was already there, setting up equipment and reviewing strategy notes he'd been working on since midnight. We're not trying to turn back time, Sammy explained as he wrapped Mike's hands. We're adapting what still works and building a game plan around it. Your power is still devastating. Your ring IQ is better than ever. We just need to be patient and wait for the right moment. Word spread through boxing's underground network faster than wildfire. By noon, the small gym was packed with faces Mike hadn't seen in years. Former champions, trainers, fighters who'd shared the ring with legends and understood what it meant to carry the hopes of an entire generation. Iron Mike called out Roberto Duran, the legendary Hands of Stone, embracing his old friend. You need anything, you ask. Tommy Hearns arrived with ice and medical supplies. Ray Leonard brought his trainer's wisdom. Even Muhammad Ali's former cornerman, Angelo Dundee's protege, showed up with notebooks full of strategic insights. This isn't just about you, explained Marvin Hagler's old sparring partner as they gathered around Mike between training rounds. This is about all of us. Every fighter who believed in honor, respect, and earning your victories through sacrifice. Each legend shared something, a technique, a mental approach, a piece of wisdom earned through decades in the ring. Mike absorbed it all, feeling the weight of history and brotherhood surrounding him like armor. The young ones today, they think fighting started with mixed martial arts, said one old-timer. They forgot that boxing is the sweet science, and science doesn't get old, it gets refined. As evening fell, Mike worked the speed bag with a rhythm that hypnotized everyone watching. His movements were economical now, conserving energy while maintaining deadly precision. This wasn't the explosive young destroyer who terrorized heavyweight division. This was something more dangerous, a veteran warrior who understood that survival sometimes mattered more than spectacular. There he is, Sammy whispered to the assembled legends. There's the fighter who's going to remind everyone why some names never fade. Mike felt it too, the quiet confidence that came from knowing you'd prepared as well as humanly possible with the time available. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, he was surrounded by the ghosts of boxing's greatest era, and their combined spirit flowed through him like electricity. Fight day arrived with Mike waking in complete darkness at 4:30 a.m. His apartment was silent, but his mind was crystal clear for the first time in weeks. He dressed quietly and headed to the gym, expecting to meet Sammy for their final preparation session. Instead, he found the gym lights already blazing and Sammy organizing equipment like he'd been there all night. Couldn't sleep either? Mike asked. Sleep's overrated, Sammy replied, but his bloodshot eyes told the real story. Besides, wanted to make sure everything was perfect for our final session. They worked through Mike's game plan one last time, breaking it down to its essential elements. Survive Brad's early onslaught by using the octagon's corners and cage to limit his angles of attack. Force him to carry the fight, burning energy while Mike conserved his own. Wait for the inevitable moment when Brad's arrogance would create an opening. He's going to come out like a hurricane, Sammy explained as Mike practiced his defensive positioning. Youth and chemicals make him think he's invincible. Let him think it. Let him overextend. Then punish him. Mike ran through the specific combinations he'd need. Not the flashy combinations of his youth, but economical, devastating sequences designed to end fights quickly. His body felt loose, responsive, different from the stiffness that had plagued recent training sessions. Remember, Sammy continued, this isn't about proving you're still 25. This is about proving that experience, wisdom, and heart can overcome youth and arrogance. You've got all three. At 7 a.m., they finished the technical work and moved to mental preparation. Mike sat quietly with his eyes closed, visualizing every possible scenario the fight might present. He saw himself absorbing punishment early, staying patient, waiting for his moment. He felt the crowd's energy, both supportive and hostile. He imagined Brad's trash talk, his showboating, his inevitable overconfidence. Most importantly, he saw himself standing victorious at the end, not for personal glory, but for the children who would be watching from ringside, believing that good could still triumph over evil. When he opened his eyes, the doubt and pain that had consumed him for weeks were gone. In their place was something Mike hadn't felt in years, the cold certainty that had made him the most feared man in boxing. How do you feel? Sammy asked. Dangerous, Mike replied, and the word carried decades of accumulated power. Sammy smiled for the first time in days. There he is. There's Iron Mike. The sun was rising over Brooklyn, painting the sky the color of blood and gold. In 8 hours, Mike would step into an octagon with a man half his age who wanted to destroy him. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Mike wasn't worried about losing. He was ready to remind the world why legends never truly fade. Barclays Center in Brooklyn buzzed with an energy unlike any fight in recent memory. The crowd was split down generational lines. Young UFC fans wearing Brad's merchandise mixed uneasily with older boxing enthusiasts sporting vintage Tyson shirts from the 1980s. The divide was visible, audible, and growing tenser by the hour. This is unprecedented, ESPN's ringside reporter noted, scanning the packed arena. I've never seen demographics this clearly separated at a combat sports event. It's like two different eras colliding in real time. Brad's entrance was pure spectacle. Pyrotechnics exploded as he emerged through a tunnel of smoke and lasers, his entourage of social media influencers filming every step. His walk to the octagon took 15 minutes, with costume changes, dance breaks, and enough lights to power a small city. The future of combat sports, the announcer bellowed as Brad shadowboxed for the cameras. His physique looked carved from marble, every muscle defined to impossible perfection. The crowd's younger section screamed approval, while older fans sat in stony silence. Looking good, champ, Ashley called from ringside, her cameras capturing every angle of Brad's pre-fight theatrics. The streaming numbers are already breaking records. Mike's entrance was everything Brad's wasn't. He walked through the crowd itself, no special effects or elaborate staging. Just Iron Mike Tyson in simple black shorts and boots, accompanied by Sammy and Dot, acknowledging fans who remembered when boxing meant something beyond entertainment, older. Spectators reached out to touch him as he passed, their faces showing something between reverence and concern. These were people who'd watched him destroy men in his prime, who understood they might be witnessing a legend's final moments. Iron Mike, Iron Mike, they chanted, their voices carrying decades of respect. But it was the small section of children from the youth center that gave Mike strength. Marcus and the others sat in the front row, their young faces showing absolute faith in their teacher. They wore homemade t-shirts reading Mr. Tyson and held signs saying, "Our hero." In the dressing rooms, final preparations revealed the contrast between fighters. Brad recorded last-minute social media content, predicting total domination while his team applied final touches to his perfect appearance. "This old man's about to learn what evolution looks like," Brad told his phone camera. "I'm not just fighting Mike Tyson. I'm fighting the entire myth of boxing's golden age. When this is over, everyone will understand that legends are just old men who refuse to accept reality." Meanwhile, Mike sat quietly with his eyes closed, Sammy's hands on his shoulders providing silent support. No cameras, no predictions, no trash talk. Just a veteran warrior finding the calm center that had always preceded his most devastating performances. "You ready for this?" Sammy asked. Mike opened his eyes, and Sammy saw something that made him step back involuntarily. The gentle mentor who taught children was gone. In his place sat the destroyer who'd once made heavyweight champions wake up. In cold sweats. "Let's go to work," Mike said quietly. The octagon door closed with a metallic clang that echoed through the packed arena. Mike and Brad stood 8 feet apart, 2 generations of combat sports separated by 30 years and a philosophy that would be settled in the next 15 minutes. The referee, clearly intimidated by the magnitude of the moment, gave instructions that seemed to favor Brad's aggressive style. No warnings about excessive clinching, no emphasis on protecting a grounded opponent. Just fight clean and listen to my commands. The bell rang, and Brad exploded forward like a caged animal finally released. For the first 3 minutes, it looked like every prediction of Mike's destruction might come true. Brad circled constantly, using his speed advantage to land quick combinations before dancing away from Mike's power shots. His kicks targeted Mike's legs, trying to break down the older fighter's mobility. Mike absorbed the punishment while studying patterns. Brad threw the same 3-kick sequence after every successful combination. He dropped his left hand slightly when setting up his right cross. Most importantly, his breathing was getting heavier despite his perfect conditioning. "Stay patient," Mike told himself, using the octagon's corners to limit Brad's angles. When Brad pressed forward, Mike tied him up against the cage, forcing the younger fighter to carry his weight. The crowd's energy was deafening. Young fans screamed for Brad to finish the old man, while boxing loyalists urged Mike to weather the storm. The children from the youth center sat in terrified silence, watching their hero take punishment they'd never imagined possible. As the round ended, Brad strutted to his corner with his hands raised, playing to the cameras that captured every moment of his apparent dominance. The commentary team praised his performance while questioning whether Mike had any business in the octagon. "Beautiful work from Mitchell," the lead announcer declared. "Tyson looks lost in there. This might be over sooner than anyone expected." But in Mike's corner, Sammy saw something different. He treated the cut above Mike's eye while delivering crucial information. "His breathing's too heavy for someone in that kind of shape," Sammy observed. "You're making him work harder than he wants to. And did you see how he grabbed his side after that clinch? Your body shots are adding up." Mike nodded, his eyes never leaving Brad's corner across the octagon. The young champion was flexing for his social media team, but Mike noticed something Brad's own corner missed: the rapid rise and fall of his chest, the subtle way he favored his left side. The pace was taking more out of Brad than anyone realized. Round 2 began with Brad even more aggressive, sensing blood in the water. He came forward with reckless abandon, throwing combinations that would have hospitalized most men Mike's age. But Mike had fought the greatest heavyweights in boxing history. He knew how to make dangerous men miss by inches, how to turn their aggression into exhaustion. Every wild swing Brad threw his energy he couldn't get back. "Come on, old man," Brad taunted between combinations. "Show me that legendary power." Mike continued his patient defense, but now he began countering with short, sharp punches that accumulated damage like compound interest. A left hook to Brad's ribs here, an uppercut to his solar plexus there. Nothing spectacular, but each shot was placed with surgical precision. The corrupt judges scored the round heavily against Mike despite his effective defense and growing counterattacks. Their scorecards showed Brad winning every exchange. Even moments when Mike clearly landed the cleaner shots, Brad's frustration grew as the round progressed. He'd expected Mike to fold under pressure, but the old champion kept coming forward, kept pressing, kept making him work for every moment of success. "Why won't you just fall down?" Brad snarled during a clinch. "Because I'm fighting for something bigger than myself," Mike replied calmly. With 30 seconds left in the round, Mike landed his best shot yet, a perfectly timed body shot that drove the air from Brad's lungs and made him grab his ribs reflexively. The crowd didn't fully appreciate the significance, but Brad's corner saw their fighter gasp and briefly double over as they returned to their corners. Brad maintained his confident swagger for the cameras, but his team noticed what Mike had seen minutes earlier. The champion's heart rate was elevated beyond normal parameters. His recovery time between intense exchanges was increasing, and his punch output had dropped significantly in the final minute. "You're doing great," his head trainer lied, while privately wondering why their perfectly conditioned athlete was showing signs of fatigue after just 6 minutes. Across the octagon, Mike sat calmly on his stool, breathing controlled and eyes sharp despite the punishment he'd absorbed. His corner worked on the cuts and swelling, but Mike's focus remained laser-sharp on Brad's corner, studying every gesture, every expression, every sign of the crack he knew was coming. "He's breaking," Mike told Sammy quietly. "Chemistry can't fix what's happening to his mind." Sammy smiled grimly as he applied Vaseline to Mike's cuts. "One more round. Give me one more round of patience, and we'll show him what real power looks like." Round 3 began with everything on the line. Brad needed to finish Mike to guarantee victory with the corrupt judging. Mike needed one perfect moment to change everything and save the youth center. Brad came out swinging with desperate aggression. His combinations still fast, but lacking the crispness that had dominated earlier rounds. Fatigue was a subtle thing, a punch thrown from slightly too far away, a defensive movement a fraction slower than needed, breathing patterns that betrayed a body working beyond its optimal capacity. Mike continued his methodical counterattacking, now with more frequency and accuracy. His shots found their mark with increasing regularity, body shots that made Brad wince, uppercuts that snapped his head back, hooks that tested his balance and resolve. The crowd sensed the shift in momentum. What had seemed like inevitable victory for youth and chemical enhancement was becoming a war of attrition between experience and arrogance. "He's human after all," Mike thought as he slipped another wild combination and answered with a perfectly timed right hand that rocked Brad backward. With 2 minutes remaining, Brad hurt Mike with his best combination of the night, a left hook followed by a straight right that sent the older fighter stumbling against the cage. The arena erupted as Brad moved in for the finish, sensing his moment of triumph. But as he approached the stunned veteran, Brad made the mistake that arrogance always makes. He raised his hands prematurely, turning toward the crowd and cameras to celebrate his impending victory. His guard dropped, his attention shifted from the fight to the performance, and for one critical moment, he forgot that Mike Tyson was still conscious and still dangerous. "It's over," Brad shouted to his social media team, his back half-turned. To Mike as he basked in premature glory. In that instant, time slowed for Mike as it had countless times throughout his legendary career. He saw the opening with perfect clarity, Brad's chin exposed, his weight distributed poorly, his attention anywhere but on the man who'd built a career destroying overconfident opponents. Mike stepped forward with the peekaboo style that had terrorized a generation of heavyweights, setting up the combination that would define both men's legacies forever. The crowd held its collective breath as Iron Mike Tyson prepared to remind the world why some legends never truly fade. "Big mistake, kid," Mike whispered as he unleashed 40 years of accumulated power and wisdom in 3 perfect punches. The combination that followed was a masterpiece of violence and precision, delivered with the cold certainty that had once made Mike Tyson the most feared man on earth. First came the left hook to Brad's exposed ribs, a shot that collapsed his entire left side and doubled him over in agonized surprise. The sound of impact echoed through the arena like a gunshot, followed by Brad's involuntary gasp as the air exploded from his lungs. Before Brad could recover, Mike's right uppercut found his chin with devastating accuracy. Delivered from the perfect angle with every ounce of power Mike's aging body could generate, The punch snapped Brad's head backwards so violently that his mouthpiece flew into the crowd. The final shot was pure artistry. As Brad's head snapped back from the uppercut, Mike's left hook found the exact spot where jaw met skull. The impact lifted Brad completely off his feet before sending him crashing to the canvas like a fallen tree. Brad hit the octagon floor with a sickening thud and lay completely motionless. His arms were twisted at odd angles, his eyes rolled back, his body displaying the limp stillness that indicated total unconsciousness. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat that lasted forever. Then the crowd exploded in a roar that shook the building's foundation. Young and old, UFC fans and boxing loyalists, everyone united in witnessing something truly historic. Mike immediately showed concern for his fallen opponent, staying close as medical staff rushed into the octagon. Despite everything Brad had put him through, Mike knelt beside the unconscious fighter, checking for signs of serious injury. "Come on, kid," Mike said softly. "Come back to us." After several tense minutes, Brad's eyes fluttered open. He looked around in confusion, not immediately remembering where he was or how he'd gotten there. When his vision cleared and he saw Mike's concerned face above him, something fundamental shifted in his expression. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement had vanished. In their place was something Brad had never experienced before: genuine respect for someone who had earned it through decades of sacrifice and skill. 6 months later, the Brownsville Youth Center had been completely renovated and expanded. Fight proceeds and donations that poured in after Mike's victory had funded new equipment, additional programs, and a scholarship fund for kids who wanted to pursue boxing professionally. Brad Mitchell, having overcome his drug dependencies and legal troubles stemming from Vinnie Torino's exposed corruption network, quietly contributed to the center's expansion. His public apology had been brief but genuine, and his private conversation with Mike remained between them. Mike continued teaching kids, his legendary status now enhanced by proof that true champions are measured not by titles collected, but by lives protected and improved. The final scene found him in the same place the story began, patiently correcting young Marcus's form while other children practiced their combinations nearby. "Mr. Tyson," Marcus asked during a water break, "what's the most important thing about fighting?" Mike smiled as he adjusted the boy's gloves. "Knowing what's worth fighting for, son, and understanding that the strongest victories come from protecting those who can't protect themselves." The lesson continued as it always had, with patience, wisdom, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from proving heroes are real and good can still triumph over evil. Outside, the Brooklyn sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Iron Mike Tyson taught children that legends never truly fade. They just find new battles worth winning. That if you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.